Namco, king of the arcades. Or at least one of the kings of the arcade, since there was kind of an ongoing war between them, Sega, and Taito. Namco's taking advantage of the power of the PC Engine to bring home ports of their recent arcade hits, something that the Famicom at this point couldn't keep up with. In fact, Dragon Spirit is really the last time where Namco will make a port for the PC Engine and a port for the Famicom. As I mentioned, Dragon Spirit was an enormous hit in Japanese arcades. In a sense, it feels like a successor to Xevious. It might be the last really great shoot-'em-up in the Xevious mode, where you have an air attack and a ground attack. The Famicom port of Dragon Spirit was released almost 6 months after the PC Engine port, and it's a surprisingly strong showing for the Famicom. Strong enough to be one of the better shoot-'em-ups on the platform. The game came over from the arcade, mostly intact, just a bit scaled down, though it is kind of an easy shooter. But then there's the PC Engine version. And the PC Engine version blows the Famicom version out of the water. The plot of Dragon Spirit is that an evil god is going to be resurrected, and a princess has been abducted as a sacrifice, so a knight uses his holy sword to turn into a blue dragon and shoot down a bunch of monsters. The PC Engine version consists of 7 stages. 2 levels from the arcade version had to be removed due to space limitations. The other big change that's immediately obvious is that the game no longer scrolls left and right. Instead, you have a complete view of the area. Button 2 fires straight ahead, while button 1 lobs a fireball at the ground. Something to be careful about if you're using an auto-fire controller is that the 2 shot styles interfere with each other when you hold both buttons down. Just use one at a time and switch as needed. Eggs on the ground and flashing enemies will release power-ups. Red eggs release a hexagram, and that adds 1 point to the fire bar. But 1 point doesn't do anything. You have to get 3 points in the fire bar to increase your shot power. There's 2 levels of attack power like this, and they make your shots a bit bigger and do more damage. The blue eggs release head increases, and that is what it sounds like. You get one, you grow an extra head. The dragon has a maximum of 3 heads, so anything else just doesn't do anything. You have a health bar in Dragon Spirit, and getting hit by anything strips away 1 level of power as well as taking off that chunk of health. The other items drop from enemies, and these aren't consistent drops. If you play the exact same way every time, then you'll get the same item from an enemy. The variations on who you've shot down or if you've been hit change which enemies flash and what they drop. There are 2 weapon power-ups that change the color of the dragon, one that gives you giant fire breath and one that gives you a spread shot. There's also a power-up that gives you an enormous homing shot, firing dozens of bullets that chase down enemies everywhere. That power-up only lasts a short time though. The diamond and gold orbs are just points. For some reason, the gold is worth more than the diamond. Collecting a heart adds a little dragon egg down in the lower left-hand corner, and as you collect additional ones, it hatches. Collect 3 hearts and you've earned an extra life. Collecting the S makes the default blue dragon shrink to a smaller size, more easily able to slip between bullets. The wing makes you invincible for a short time. There isn't a great indicator for when it wears off, so I prefer to not rely on it. Finally, the earthquake item shakes the ground, destroying all enemies sitting on it. And this effect goes on for about 10 or 15 seconds, clearing out enemies as you go forward. Something that you're going to notice when you play the PC Engine version of Dragon Spirit is this game is brutal. There's a few different reasons for that. First, the dragon hitbox is a little bit weird. Because the dragon's bobbing around and flapping its wings, it's not really where the sprite is. So where things can hit you is a little bit ambiguous, and Dragon Spirit is the kind of game where you're going to have to navigate some tight spaces. Still, I think this is something you can get used to with practice. I'm willing to just call this one a skill issue and move on. Second problem, however, is the dragon is slow, and there are no speed power-ups. While this is far from a bullet hell shooter, there are a lot of enemies that spread a lot of bullets around, and just moving to avoid things can be tough. Ground targets in particular seem to be where most of the bullets come from, and Dragon Spirit's the kind of game that loves piling in huge clusters of ground targets where you can't possibly take them all out. If you lose control of the screen in one of those sections, you're probably going to get hit at least once. And all you'll really be able to do is endure it until that area has passed. And speaking of getting hit, there are no invulnerability frames. Okay, that's actually a lie, but the invulnerability period after you get hit is extremely short. Short enough that it's not uncommon to get hit by the same thing twice. Particularly when you're dealing with one of those areas where you can't maneuver. The final thing making this game really tough is that there are no continues. When you get a game over, it's back to the title screen. Well, unless you use a cheat code. Hold down buttons 1 and 2 and press start, and that's how you continue. And this can be used twice. When you continue, you go back to the start of that stage, so it's not like continuing is that much of a help. There's also a cheat code that will let you continue 100 times. It's a bit long, so I'm just putting it as text on the screen. But again, you still have to be able to clear the level. That's a pretty good code to use while you're learning the game, since this is one of those shoot-'em-ups where they like to pull nasty tricks on you. There's also a cheat code to bring up a music player so that you can listen to all of the award-winning songs. And there's one more extra special trick. On the PC Engine, if you press Run and Select, the system performs a soft reset. If you hold down Select and do this 57 times on the title screen, the game changes aspect ratio. It's not really arcade accurate since the arcade screen is narrower, but it does give more of an arcade-ish feel. Dragon Spirit got a sequel, and that sequel makes its way to the PC Engine eventually. Though that game didn't have the same impact as Dragon Spirit. Dragon Spirit, on the other hand, was so popular that it became the first video game to get an art book. Or at least the first dedicated art book that anyone is aware of. Dragon Spirit was a pretty big deal at the time in Japan. When the PC Engine version of Dragon Spirit was released, it was a pretty big hit. But opinion dropped off a bit as time went by. People are still nostalgic for this version, but Dragon Spirit fans aren't fond of how the game was cut down. My own feeling here is this is a good game and a good shoot-'em-up. It's also really, really hard. Especially the bosses that give you absolutely no room to maneuver. With this Firebird, for example, it zooms in on you fast, and you basically have to fly inside the orbit of those large rocks in order to survive. And that's only the second boss. The arcade version is pretty accessible these days, so you might want to just go over and play that one. But if you only had access to the PC Engine version, I think you'd be pretty satisfied.